Hilchos Terumos Perek Arba Asar. The laws of the Truma separation, chapter 14. I'm using a different Rambam today. Usually I have the Moznayim Rambam. Today I left it at home. So if you're using the Moznayim Rambam and you have a little bit of a different text, you'll know why. But today we're using the Dvar Malchus, which is from the Vugshal print of the Rambam. We are continuing the topic from yesterday about mixtures, Truma mixtures. The basic principle, which we learned yesterday, is that Truma becomes nullified 1 in 100. So if you have a measurement of wheat that falls into 100 times of itself, even if the measurement of wheat is Truma, the whole Truma becomes nullified. Today we're going to consider a bunch of different variations of cases that relate to this principle. So the Rambam begins with the following scenario. Chamishim te'enim shcheiros v'chamishim levanos. You have 50 dark or black figs and 50 white figs. Shenafla l'soichan te'ena achas shel truma. One fig falls into this mixture. So why is this a new scenario? Because this is, here you have 100 times the truma, but if you think about it, you don't really. Because the white fig can be told apart from the black fig. So therefore, the Rambam says, Hoysa levana, if the fig that fell into the mixture was white, hashcheiros mutares. So the black figs are all permitted because you know that no truma fell into them. V'halevanos medumais. And the white ones are meduma. Meduma means a mixture with truma because you know it's white and there aren't 100 white figs to counter the one truma white fig. Haisa shcheira, if the fig that fell in was black, hashcheiros medumais v'halevanos mutares. So the opposite, the black ones, the dark ones are considered meduma. They're problematic because they for sure have truma inside them and there's not 100 to combat. While the white ones, which you know for sure that there's no white truma fig that fell in, they're permitted. But if you don't know whether it was black or white, so fascinatingly the Rambam rules, since all of them are in doubt, so they actually work to your leniency, they work to your advantage. And you say, hey, bottom line, there's 100 against the questionable fig that fell inside. Yada mehoisa. Achar shenafla v'shachach. If, when it fell inside, you knew what color it was. And if you know, of course, the law gets decided one way. And then later you forgot which color it was. So unlike the first case where you don't even know what color it was when it fell in, here you knew what it was when it fell in. And later on you forgot, hare kulan medumai. So here it works actually against you. And here we say that they're all going to be problematic. We don't say, oh, now the bottom line is there's 100 in a mixture, let the 100 nullify the one. Because you knew at one point in time. And the Rebbe has a whole sikha explaining this halacha. The bottom line of what he says is that there's a unique novelty the Torah has when it comes to mixtures. And that is that it all depends on your awareness. If you weren't aware when it fell in what color it was, so it works leniently. But the moment you knew, there was an awareness of which color it was when it fell inside, so then, as the Rebbe explains it, the yidi'at ha'adam, the knowledge of the person, also affects the very nature of the figs. Your awareness makes the mixture. And therefore, since you were aware what color it was when it fell in, and now you forgot, the forgetfulness cannot undo the fact that you knew about it before and mixed them all together, and therefore, they're all considered to be mixed and problematic. That's in short a very lengthy explanation of the Rebbe on this talk. Practically speaking, the Rebbe says, here we see how powerful a Jew's mind is. Your knowledge of a color of a fig, nothing important, we're not talking about some spiritual law, but if your awareness of the color of a fig can change the status of an entire box of figs. That's the kind of a power that a Jewish soul has. Halacha base. V'chein igulei dvela umalbenim shel dvela. The same principle would apply. If it wasn't figs in questions, it was fig cakes. This was very common in those days. They would press figs together, make a cake out of it. And like today, they like to have different designs of cakes. So in those days also they had different designs of cakes. They had a round cake.
We have it today, figs.
Huh?
Fig cakes.
Okay. So you have the round ones. Igule dvela is in a circular shape. And malbenim is in a rectangular shape. So same thing. Like black figs and white figs are two different things. So round cakes and square cakes are two different things. And now, shenafal igule malbin shel truma l'seichan, another cake of truma this time, falls into the mixture of cakes, but you don't know if it's a square cake or a circle cake. So like in the halacha of the figs, if you weren't aware at all what it was when it fell in, the circles and the squares combine, and it allows the truma to be nullified in 101. It goes even further. What if they were all circular cakes, but they were different sizes? There was bigger ones and smaller ones. Comes another cake, falls inside, but you don't know if it was bigger or smaller. Now, if it's smaller, there's 100 times the amount. But if it's from the bigger cakes, you don't have 100 times the bigger cakes. That's the problem here. Says the Rambam, actually we go lenient. We allow the mixture of big and small cakes to nullify the fallen cake, whether using number or weight. Whichever one works to our advantage. Ketad, what does that mean? Nafal igol lemeya igulin gelu muktanim. Okay, you have again, same case. Circle cake falls into 100 circle cakes, big and small ones. So first of all, I'm lenient, and I say that the small one fell in. And I only have to lift out one of the small ones. Assume that a small truma cake fell in. Take out a small one and give it to the kohen. Nafal igol igulin. But what if a circular cake fell into 40 cakes? So if you go just by number over here, you got a problem because there's only 40 times, not 100. But what if you go by weight? There's 100 times. Mehen esrim igol mishkal kol echad arba litrin. You have 20 cakes that weigh, each one weighs 4 litras. Umehen esrim igol mishkal kol echad litra. And then you have 20 cakes who each one weighs a litra. So now 4 times 20 is 80. 1 times 20 is 20. That's 100 litra in total. Since the total weight of everything is 101 litras, I'm going to assume that the smaller cake fell in, which only weighed 1 litra, and I'll lift one of the small ones. So even though in number you only have 40 against it, but in weight you have 100 pounds against 1 pound, so you're good. Halacha Gimel, although 2 different types of figs, or 2 different shapes of cakes, or 2 different weights of cakes can combine to nullify, 2 different types of flour, coarse flour and fine flour, they don't combine. We don't view them as mixed because you can sift them apart. And the commentaries do say this is only going to be in a case where you know what fell in. If you know that coarse truma flour fell into the mixture or fine truma flour fell into the mixture, then the coarse flour and the fine flour will not combine to nullify. But if you didn't know what fell in, then it's exactly like the figs, and they actually will combine to nullify the truma. Halacha dalet. Sa'a shel chitim shenafla al pi megura shel chitim. Here we have a big pile of wheat. Comes another pile of wheat grain and falls onto the top of the pile. Now, why is that important? Because when it's on top of the pile, ein misharin isa be'echadumeya. We don't compare 1 to 100. Because everybody understands that when wheat falls onto wheat, it doesn't mix into the entirety of the pile of wheat. It kind of stays on top. She'ein misharin ella im nivlala truma imachulin. We're only going to use the 100 to 1 ratio if we know that the truma got intermixed or intertwined with the chulin, with the regular stuff. Or if you don't know. But if you know that the truma fell onto the top of the pile, then you work differently. The Ketzal Yasa, what should you do? Treat it as if it were this case, as if it were not wheat onto wheat, but wheat onto barley. Wheat onto barley looks different. If a bunch of wheat fell onto barley, what would you do? You'd simply skim off the top, right? Scrape off the top layer of wheat, and you're good. Simply separate the truma which fell on top of the pile, and just for good luck, take a whole bunch, a little bit more extra. So you know pretty much for sure that you got all the truma off, a little bit of the chulin as well. As though somebody would be collecting wheat from on top of a pile of barley, in which case that's what you would do. If wheat falls onto barley, you go with your hands, you just take the top layer with a little bit of barley too, get rid of everything and you're good. Same thing over here. Halacha hey. Shtei kupais, or shtei megurais, Shenafla truma l'seich achas mehen v'nivlela. 2 boxes, or 2 piles. We're going to use the boxes. 2 boxes of chulin. Okay, that's regular stuff. Truma falls into one of them and mixes in. So not the apples fell on top of the pile. They fell in and they got good mixed in. We just don't know which one they fell into. So the practical law would tell you the 2 boxes have to be treated as separate. Let's say there's 50 apples in one and 50 apples in the other. You can't say that if one apple falls in, the 2 would combine. That's what you would think. Says the Rambam, if the 2 piles were in one home, one room, they do combine. And the truma apple can be nullified 1 to 100 of everything, as if they were one big pile. The 2 boxes also combine. Even if one box was in one room and one box was in the other room, because it's very easy to bring the 2 boxes together. But if the 2 boxes were in 2 different cities, so you had a box in Sherman Oaks, you had a box in Studio City, and you know that in one of them truma fell in, but you don't know which one, the 2 boxes are too far away, they don't combine. But if they're in your own house, one upstairs, one downstairs, doesn't matter. They're considered to be working together and they can combat the 1 apple of truma, and if there's 100 times, then they win. Halacha vav, the ketzad ma'aleh sa'asha nafla. How do you lift the one measurement which got mixed in? Yesterday we said that when truma gets mixed in 1 to 100, biblically it's nullified, but you still have to take one out and give it to the Kohen. So what do you do in this case? You have 2 boxes, one's on the top floor, one's on the bottom floor. An apple fell into one of them, or 2 apples fell into one of them, and you don't know which one. So which box do you take the apple for the Kohen? Says the Rambam, you do whatever you want. If you wanted to pick up the full measurement from one of the boxes, do that. If you wanted to take half from this one, half from that one, you could also do it. In other words, halachically speaking, we really look at the 2 boxes as if they're completely mixed up. And therefore you can take the Kohen's part from either one. A new case. Kadim mileim te'enim shel chulin. Okay, here's the picture. Bunch of jugs are full of figs. Each one is full of chulin figs. Chulin figs means they're regular grain, ordinary figs. Shedaras litra te'enim shel truma, befi kad echad mehem. Now you know that you took a bunch of truma figs and stuffed them into the mouth of one of the barrels, one of the jugs. Ve'en yodua ezuhi, and you don't know which one it is. So now you have really 2 issues at hand. Number 1 is you don't know which barrel it is out of all the barrels. So in that way, you look at each barrel as an individual unit, and you have to have 100 barrels against the potential 1 barrel. Plus, within every barrel, part of it is truma, part of it is not, assuming that's the barrel that got mixed in. So what do you do? It says that Rambam, if there was at least 101 jugs, 101 barrels, harezu tale. So wherever it is, it's nullified because there's 100 times itself. And therefore, all you have to do is you take 1 barrel, 1 jug, and you sell it off to the Kohen. Besides for the worth of that 1 pound of figs that you stuffed into the barrel, because that belongs to the Kohen regardless. He doesn't have to pay for that. V'hashar mutar, and the rest are permitted. The rest of the barrels, that is. If there's less than 100 barrels to work against the 1 barrel that you're in doubt, so now, hapumin kulan medumais, v'hashulayim mutarin. Figs, they don't intertwine, they don't mix like that. You stuffed the bunch of figs into the top of one of the barrels. So maximum, you can only forbid the tops of all the barrels. Pumin is like from the word peh, the mouth. The mouth of every barrel is going to be forbidden, v'hashulayim mutarin, but all the bottoms are going to be good, because the figs couldn't have gone all the way down. The same applies. It wasn't a barrel, it was a kaveres, literally means a beehive, but it means a utensil that was shaped like a beehive, kind of like a barrel, wider in the middle and narrower on the 2 sides, or onto a straight cake of figs, and you don't know which one it is. Same law applies. If there's 100 against it, good. If not, the top parts are problematic, the bottom parts are fine. Darsal piha igul ve'en yodua im bitzfaynei ay bidraymai ve'loy eze igul hu. What if you made a double problem? You had a bunch of fig cakes, and you know that you pressed more figs onto one of the cakes. But first of all, you don't know which cake it is. Second of all, even in the cake, you don't know which side you stuffed it on. You know you didn't stuff it onto the top of the entire cake, just on one side. So now, we treat all the figs that are pressed into this cake as separate. They're not one big cake. And if they're not one big cake, then all the figs become one big mixture. As the commentaries explain it, they all become part of the mixture. And now you go by weight. And it will be nullified based on weight. If all the cakes together equal 100 litras, then that one cake, which has the truma pressed onto it, is nullified. Yes, as long as every fig cake individually weighs more than 2 litras, so that in the individual cake, you're certain that whatever truma was put in there is nullified in a majority. Because when you're in doubt about truma, as long as there's a simple majority against it, then that helps to nullify it in the individual cake, and then because there's 100 times the individual cake, the whole mixture is permitted. Halacha ches hatruma vada oiser b'meya usfeika oiser b'chamishim. When it comes to truma, if you're certain that truma fell into a mixture, then you need to have 100 against it. If you're uncertain whether truma is in a mixture, you only have to have 50. Ve'ein lo heter ela b'roiv, and it can only become permitted if there's a majority against it. But if there is more than 50 against it and you don't know where the truma is, you don't have to have a majority. The fact that there's 50 already nullifies it. Keita, what does that mean? Te'ena achas truma shenafla letishim v'teisha. V'harei hamea kayamin. Oops, not yet. This is a simple case. If one fig of truma falls into 99 figs of truma and all 100 are sitting there, that's called vada'a. It's a certain case. You know that truma is definitely in there. Hakel asur lezarim kamei shebiyarnu. Everything is forbidden to non-Kohens, as we explained. Nafla achas mechamishim. Or other texts have lichamishim. We're going to translate it as lichamishim. Nafla achas lichamishim. If one fig fell into 50 figs, right over here, va'avda achas min hakel, and then one fell into the garbage. So follow the steps. Truma fig fell into 50 figs. In this moment there are 51 figs. Then one of the figs falls into the garbage. Shema achas min hachulin hishavda, or ya achas shenafla hishavda. Maybe it's one of the chulin ones that got lost. Maybe it's the one truma that fell in. That's the one that got lost. So Hari elu asurais, because it's a doubt of truma, and there's 50, so it's forbidden. Ad sheyarba alein chulin mimakim acher, v'yosef alein chamishim te'enim ba'achas yostar ala koil, unless you add more figs to the mixture, 51 more figs, which you're allowed to do because you're in doubt. Usually you can't just add more chulin to the mixture to make it nullified. But here, because one of them fell out, and that may have been the truma one, so Torah allows you to add more figs and permit the whole mixture. But if it wasn't 50, if it was 51, and then a truma falls into 51, so there's 52 in total, and one of them falls out, and there's 51 back, hutar hashar lezarim. At this moment, the whole thing is permitted. Because once you have more than 50, you're good. Halacha yud sa'at truma, shenafla lepachis mimeya ma'aser rishain shaloi nitla trumasa. Okay, so here we have a sack of ma'aser. That means this is meant to go to the Levi. Now, when the Levi gets his ma'aser, we know that he has to separate 10% trumat ma'aser, 10% to the Kohen. The Levi didn't do that yet. So it's a sack of ma'aser, shaloi nitla trumase, which means the trumas ma'aser wasn't separated yet. And then comes this measurement of regular truma, falls into this mixture. Oy le ma'aser sheni vehekdish, shaloi nifdu. Or, let's say this wasn't ma'aser, let's say it was ma'aser sheni, the second tithe. Or it was consecrated and it hadn't yet been redeemed. So in a way it's somewhat holy still. And truma falls into it. V'nidma hakoil. And because there is less than 100 times the truma, the whole sack becomes meduma, becomes forbidden. Im le'maiser rishen nafla. So if it's the first case, where it fell into maiser, so then yikare shem or yikra shem litrumas maiser. So here it's a little bit of an easier solution because 10% of this sack ultimately is going to belong to the Kohanim. There's an additional piece of truma here that also belongs to the Kohanim. So what you do is, you designate the trumas meiser in your mind. You say, hey, There's 10% in the sack belongs to the Kohen. Let it belong to the Kohen. That's called Yikra Shem. You call the name. You say the name in your mind. You designate it. And then, v'yimacher hakoil hakoyanim, sell the whole sack to the Kohanim, because he owns the potential Trumas Meiser in there, plus the Truma that got mixed in there. Chutz midmei Truma shenaflo, midmei Trumas Meiser shabai. Sell him the whole sack at a lower rate, besides for the amount that this Trumas Meiser would be, and the Truma would be. That belongs to him anyways. If it wasn't Meiser, regular Meiser, if it was the second tithe or consecrated foods, yipadu, huh? Find another Kohen. Someone's going to want it. I know, but somebody will need it. If it had fallen into a mixture of the second tithe or hektish consecrated food, yipadu. So same system, just first redeem it, because second tithe has to be redeemed, transferred to money. And then you sell the whole sack to the Kohen, besides for the worth of the truma that's inside it. Halacha Yud Aleph, Sa'at truma tmeya, shenafla lepachais mimeya chulin, oy meiser rishon, oy meiser sheni, oy hektish, bein tmeyin, bein tehirim. Okay, so you have a sa'ah of truma tmeya, all right? It's impure truma, and it falls into less than 100 times itself of regular grain. Doesn't matter if it's impure or pure. And the truth is, it could even be meiser or meiser sheni or hektish. Doesn't matter. But we're going to go with the chulin case. Okay, simple case. Bein tmein, bein tehirim, whether it's impure, whether it's pure. Hoyil v'nid mahakoil, since there's less than 100 times itself, which means the whole mixture becomes meduma. The whole mixture is treated like truma, and the truma in this case is impure. Harei hakoil ki truma tmeya. So the whole sack needs to be treated like impure truma, which cannot be eaten by anybody, even by a Kohen. It's all forbidden forever. You leave it to rot. When are we saying this? If the mixture is something which is not typically eaten raw, let's say it's raw wheat kernels. You don't eat raw wheat kernels, you process it into flour. But if it's a food which could be eaten raw, let's say it's a mixture of apples, don't just leave them alone. Person's going to stumble and eat them when it's impure. Simply light it up on fire, use it as fuel right away, the same way you would do for regular impure truma. Halacha Yud Beis. Sa'at truma tehoira shenafla lepachis mimeya chulin tmeya. Different scenario. This time, it's a measurement of truma which is pure. Falls into less than 100 times itself, chulin tmeyin, impure chulin. So, the truma, by touching the chulin that's impure, became impure. What do? Yimacher hakoil hakoyanim chutz midmei truma. So like any classic case of truma mixed with chulin, you sell it off to the Kohen, besides for the worth of the amount of truma that got mixed in. But because everything is potentially impure, the Kohen needs to eat this entire mixture toasted. That's someone toasting grain. Why toasted? So this ties into a law we mentioned the other day, and we're going to have it extensively in the Rambam's 10th book. When food becomes ritually impure, it can only make other food impure if that food has touched one of the 7 halachic liquids. Water, wine, blood, oil, milk, dew, and what? What am I missing? Honey. One of the 7 liquids. So in this case, you have a sack of chulin which is impure, but the truma is still pure. It hasn't yet come into contact with liquids. Yeah. So it's not going to become impure by touching the rest of the sack. The Kohen needs to make sure that never happens. And therefore he's not allowed to process this whole sack with any liquid. The only way he can consume it is by toasting it over the fire where there's no water involved. Or if he wants to process it, he can knead it in the dough with fruit juice, not one of the 7 liquids. They won't make the grain susceptible to tuma. All this to protect the truma, the pure truma, from becoming impure from the rest of the chulin which is impure. Or you have another option. You can knead it in a regular dough with water, as long as you do it in quantities that are less than an egg-sized portion. So it's a big bother, but you can do that. Because impure food cannot pass on impurity to other food unless it's the size of an egg. Or you can take a little bit of a size, less than an egg, and put it into a bigger dough, and that would make a bigger dough, but the point is using less than an egg size. Again, all this not to allow the truma to become impure. That's the way to safeguard it. Halacha Yud Gimel, Sa'at Truma Tmeya, Shenafla Lemeya Chulin Tahira. Another scenario. Impure truma falls into 100 times itself of pure chulin. So it's nullified, because there's 100 this time, unlike the last cases. But there's an impurity-purity issue here. V'chein Sa'at Truma Tahira, Shenafla Lemeya Chulin Tmeya. Other scenario. Pure truma falls into impure chulin, but it's 100 times itself. So first of all, says the Rambam, Tala be'echodumeya. Nullified. Both scenarios are nullified. Because there's 100 times. However, because there's impurity involved in here, it has to be eaten as toasted grain, with no liquid. Or kneaded in fruit juice, which is also not susceptible, or less than a kibetza.
Only the tamer.
Huh?
Only the tamer, not
Well,
the other.
no, I'm saying in both scenarios, you have to assume that there's truma mixed in somewhere. Even though, when truma falls into 100 times, you do lift out one measurement and give it to the Kohen, but there's no way to be certain that it's the exact one that fell in. That's the one that fell out. There's always going to be some leftover truma impure or pure truma that became impure in the sacks. And therefore, it's the Kohen's obligation to protect it from becoming impure. And therefore, he needs to always, in this case, take care not to have any unkosher liquids touching the grain. Halacha Yudalit. Sa'at truma tmeya, shenafla lemeya sa'ashal truma tahira. So till now we're talking about a mixture of truma and chulin. What if it's one big mixture of truma? It's all in the Kohen's house. One measurement of impure truma falls into 100 measurements of pure truma. Batla b'miyot. The one is nullified in its minority. And you can eat it all as regular pure truma.
But what's the difference between this and the other one? The other one was 99. Okay.
And also it was chulin. It was not truma. This is truma. But if indeed it fell into less than 100 times itself, even if it's other truma, so it all became impure, you leave the whole sack till it rots. Back to the two boxes. We got two boxes. Shenafla sa'ashel truma l'seich achas mehen v'noida le'ezu mehen nafla. See, there's a one here. The one is there was a measurement of truma that fell into one of the boxes, and we know which box it was. So we know it fell into this box. Then v'achar kach nafla sa'ashniya ve'ein yodua le'ezu mehen nafla. Comes a second. There's a two. Comes a second measurement of truma and falls into one of them. We don't know which one, but we already know that this box is messed up from the first truma that fell inside. So we have a rule, says the Rambam. We say the same place that the first one fell into, the second one fell into. This is a rule in halacha. We attach damaged goods to damaged goods. We already know that this is damaged goods, so if there's more damage, it probably happened to the damaged goods. What if it was the opposite scenario? The 1 and 2 are exchanged. Watch. The numbers change. First, the measurement fell in. The first measurement fell in. We don't know which one it fell into. Then comes the second saw falls in, and we know which one it is. So here you can't say that principle, because there's no damaged goods that we know of in the first place. We don't work backwards and say, oh, if we know where the second one fell in, let's assume the first one also fell in over there. No, they're both messed up now. They're both in doubt. They're both forbidden. Halacha tezayin. Hayu shtei kupais achas tmeya ve'achas tahira. There was two boxes. One is impure and one is pure. Now the commentaries debate if this means truma or even chulin. Sounds like even chulin. Okay, so even two chulin boxes, one pure, one impure. V'nafla sa'ashel truma la'achas me'en ve'ein yadua ezuhi. And a measurement of truma fell into one of them, we don't know which one it is. The same principle of damaged goods falls to damaged goods, so we're going to assume that the truma fell into the impure box. Because the impure one is damaged, the truma is going to make it damaged, so that's it. Halacha Yud Zayin. From here on, we move to the last couple of halachas. They're pretty short, but there's a lot of debate around them. Shtei kupas. Okay, we're going to go with simple. Shtei kupas, you have two boxes. Achas shel truma tehira, the achas shel chulin tmein. One is pure truma, one is impure chulin. Okay, the primary commentators on the Rambam want to amend this. They want to say it's tehirin, not tmein, but we're going to go with a simple meaning, okay? One is truma tehira, one is chulin tmein. Nafla sa'at truma tehira l'soich achas mehen. If a measurement of pure truma fell into one of them, oimrin l'soich shel truma nafla. So we go on both ends. We pull the string on both ends. We assume that it fell into the truma, not into the impure one. It fell into the truma, and now this whole box is truma. However, behachulin ye'achlu b'tahara kitruma. You must treat this chulin as though it's pure, like you would truma. In other words, the reason why we're going to assume that truma fell into the truma and not into the chulin is because that's going to cause you to lose the whole box, and we don't want you to lose the whole box. But what does it hurt for you to treat this box as more pure than it actually is? That's not a problem. And therefore, we should not allow you to eat it unless you're going to be in a state of purity. Okay. Now, because we're dealing with impure chulin, so the meaning must be, treating it purely means to eat it in quantities less than an egg size, less than a kabetza. That's how the commentaries explain it. Okay. Halacha Yud Ches and Yud Tes. In many texts, it's literally repeated, the same words twice. So we read it as one halacha. Nafla sa'at truma tmeya l'seich achas me'en. Same scenario, just instead of pure truma falling in, it's impure truma falling in. Oimrin, so here we say, l'seich shel truma nafla, we assume the impure truma fell into the pure truma. V'hachulin ye'achlu kloyos o yiloishu b'mei peiros. That's how I'm reading it. Okay, if you have the text where it has two halachas repeated, we're skipping to the end of the second one. All the chulin should only be eaten as though truma fell into it, toasted grain, or kneaded in fruit juices, which doesn't make it susceptible to impurity. Now, the problem is that in this case, when it's impure truma, it doesn't matter where it fell. It's not any better to say that it fell into pure truma or impure chulin. So, therefore, I'll tell you in a second, the commentators want to mix up the order of halachas, but this is the simple meaning of the Rambam. As to why the Rambam is saying that you have to make sure the chulin doesn't become impure, again, this is here where the commentaries come in and they amend it to chulin tehirin to make it pure, and then because it's pure, you can't make it impure. Okay. Halacha chaf, shtei kupais, another scenario, two boxes. Achas shel truma tmeya, v'achas shel chulin tehirin. It's the opposite now. Impure truma versus pure chulin. The nafla sa'ah shel truma tehira l'sech achas mehen, and the sa'ah of pure truma falls into one of them. Oimrin l'sech shel truma nafla, again we say truma falls into truma. V'achulin yachlu klayas, but since it doesn't hurt you to treat the chulin as more pure, treat them as more pure, only eat them as toasted grain. Chaf alef nafla sa'ah shel truma tmeya l'sech achas mehen. If it wasn't pure, it was impure truma that falls into one of them. Shtei and asurais, they're both going to become forbidden. And here the Rambam seems to go very much against the clear Jerusalem Talmud, which has the opposite. And therefore, the commentators want to say that this halacha chaf aleph actually should come before halacha yud ches. In other words, this law is being said not in the scenario where it was impure truma and pure chulin, but rather in the scenario where it was pure truma and impure chulin. And there the Rambam is saying that if it's impure truma falling in, both of them become forbidden. And then if you say that, then the Rambam's ending goes very well. Shesfeik truma tmeya aser. Whenever you're in doubt whether there's impure truma here, the mixture becomes forbidden. Usfeik hameduma mutter. But whenever you're in doubt whether pure truma just fell into chulin and made meduma, then it's going to be permitted. Because impure truma is a problem biblically. Mixture of truma is only a problem rabbinically. Based on the principles we explained in the laws of forbidden foods. And therefore, wherever you're in doubt about whether Truma Tmeya fell in, you always be more stringent. If it's just whether Truma mixed into Chulin, you always be more lenient. And according to this amendation, where they put Chaf Aleph after Yud Zayin, so Yud Zayin and Chaf Aleph are one unit, and then Yud Ches, Halacha 18, should really go after Halacha 20. And that's the second scenario of impure Truma and pure Chulin. That's where the Gemara was saying, or that's where the Gemara and then the Rambam was saying that you have to have, you assume both stringencies that fell into the Truma, and you treat the Chulin as more pure, eat it as toasted grain or in fruit juice.